And we can finally start animating now. I'll set the loop length straight away. I think 78 frames are close to the original loop, but this is not so important. I'll start with the arm. For convenience, I'll first disable subdivision surfaces and polygons in Selection Filter. I want to rotate the forearm along the x-axis. You can see that the rotation pitch parameter is changing. So I'll click on the icon to the left of the parameter to set a keyframe on frame 0. I'll move the timeline slider somewhere up to frame 30, rotate the forearm a little, and create a keyframe as well. To loop the animation, I'll hold down Ctrl and copy the keyframe from frame 0 to the last frame. Note that the animation is currently not playing in real time because my laptop can't handle it. To improve performance, you can disable subdivision surfaces on the marshmallow, body, and the mouth. You can see that the FPS has increased a bit. If you disable subdivision surfaces on the head, you'll see that FPS has almost doubled. For the shrink wrap, deformers projecting the eyes and the mouth are quite resource intensive. When you disable subdivision surface of the head, they stop being processed. Now I'll make the wrist move. I'll need to animate rotation pitch again. Let's create a keyframe on frame 0. Then I'll rotate the wrist down a bit so that it moves after the forearm with a delay. And then I'll slightly rotate it up. The rotation value is 0 on frame 0, so I'll also add a keyframe with the rotation value of 0 on the last frame. Note that the movement slows down strangely now. To fix this, I'll open the main animation editing tool, Timeline. It allows you to adjust animation curves in the F-curve mode. I'll move the window over here. The curve displays how the parameter changes over time. And you can see that this strange slowdown is due to the shape of the curve at its ends. I'll adjust the direction of the tangents to get rid of this slowdown. Since the curve should be looped, you can do it by eye, or you can write the corresponding values for the properties of the keyframes in the attribute editor. It looks better now. Note that the timeline displays all animated objects in the scene by default. I think it is not always useful, especially when there are a lot of animated objects in the scene. I prefer to display the selected objects. For this, I'll enable the Link View to Object Manager option. Next, I'll animate the bending of the stick with the marshmallow. I'll select the Bend deformer in the Object tab and create a keyframe on frame 0 for the strength parameter. Set the value, say, to 0. I'll bend it down around frame 30. Then I'll copy the first keyframe to the end. So this is the curve we got. And I want the stick to bend up at the beginning and at the end of the loop. So I'll select both keyframes at the beginning and the end, and holding down Shift, move them up to increase the bending amplitude. Something like this. Now I'll animate the right foot. This time I will use auto keyframing in order to automatically generate keyframes. And I'll specify which attributes will be recorded. I need movement and rotation, so I'll click these icons and disable point level animation. I'll click the record button to create a keyframe on frame 0. You can see that all the coordinates of positions and rotation have been recorded. I'll move the slider to frame 10 and then rotate and move the foot like this. Next, I'll copy frame 1 to frame 20 to get such movement. This is how the animation curves look. Even though I've only moved and rotated the foot along one of the axes, curves have been created for all rotation and translation channels. I want this movement to repeat several times throughout the loop. For this, I can select a specific curve, for example, position Y. Go to Functions, Track After, and select Repeat After. You can see that another copy of this movement has appeared. And if you click on the track in the attribute editor, the track properties will appear. Here I can set the number of repetitions with the repetitions parameter. If you need to repeat all tracks on an object, you can select the object itself to select all tracks and change the parameters for all of them at once. I'll set the after parameter to repeat and the number of repetitions to 10. That will be enough until the end of the loop. Now I'll click this button and switch the timeline to the dope sheet mode in order to work with keyframes. And now I'll shift the position keyframes so that the phases of movement and rotation don't coincide, thus making the movement more interesting. I've copied the last keyframe inside the loop to keep its length unchanged. And this is the resulting movement. I'll animate the head now. I'll disable auto keyframing to create tracks only for the necessary parameters. I want to move it along the y-axis. You can see that the eyes are currently not projected, for I've turned off the subdivision surface of the head. I'll turn it on and reduce the number of iterations to 1 to increase the performance speed. As you can see, the eyes are working correctly, and the frame rate is decent. I'll create a keyframe for PY on frame 0. I'll move the head a bit down and create a keyframe in frame 6. And then I'll copy the first keyframe to, say, frame 11. I'll switch to the F-curve mode and adjust the tangents like this to make the movement sharp in the bottom point. Next, I'll select the track and enable repeat. I'll also set the number of repetitions to 10. This is what I've got as a result. Sometimes it is convenient to display the minimum or maximum value of the curve to adjust the amplitude. Go to View, Show, and select Show Min Max Values. By moving these boundaries, you can change the minimum and maximum values of the curve. Now I'll make the head rotate. For this, I'll animate the pitch rotation. Let's set a keyframe on frame 0 with a value of 0. I'll rotate the head up somewhere in the middle. And then I'll copy the first keyframe in the F-curve mode. I'll select it, copy it with Ctrl-C, and then paste it with Ctrl-V into the needed frame. Press Ctrl-Tab to maximize the viewport on the screen. Press Ctrl-Tab again to return to the normal mode. And now I'll show you how to copy the animation from one foot to the other. Select the right leg. You can see that it has tracks on all position and rotation channels. I'll click on the letter P to select all the position channels, and holding down Ctrl, click on the letter R to select all the rotation channels. Then I'll right-click and select Animation, Copy Track to copy the tracks from all the selected parameters. Next, I'll select the left foot controller. Make sure that all the position and rotation channels have been selected. Right-click on any of the parameters and select Paste Track. You can see that keyframes and the animation have appeared. The track properties, however, have default values and the movements don't repeat. Unlike on the right foot, I'll switch to the dope sheet mode and move the keyframes to the end like this. I'll make the animation a bit longer. Something like that. I'll animate the eyelids now. First, I'll add blinking. I'll select these eyelid controllers and set a frame for position Y somewhere here. I'll move the slider a couple of frames forward and lower the eyelids so that they almost completely cover the eyes. Let's create another keyframe. Then I'll copy it to keep the eyelids closed for 2 frames. And holding down Ctrl, I'll copy the first keyframe to the end of the animation to open them again. Select the keyframes at the base and holding down Shift, move one side of the tangent up to make this sharp closing and opening of the eyelids. I think it looks more natural this way. Now I'll make the pupils move. Let's create a keyframe for position Y somewhere here and move it a bit down. I'll also copy the keyframes to return the eyes to their original position. Then I've also animated the pant legs to match the movement of the right and left feet. I've rotated the body controller a little to tilt it slightly. What's more, I've animated the ear just a couple of movements, and the left wrist. When you get the animation you like, you can check how it looks by enabling all the subdivision surfaces and cloth. You can also enable the display of nulls, splines, and deformers in the viewport to hide all of the rig elements and see only the geometry. I've used the geometry of the first character for the other two characters. Just copied it, modified it where necessary, set poses, and then created clusters and controllers. I've simply copied the eyes and the mouth rigs completely, specified the new surfaces on shrink wrap deformers, and created new parent constraints for the corresponding groups. The character on the right has a guitar inside the controller, while the hand controller follows it because of the parent constraint as well. You can see that my laptop can't play the animation with several characters in the scene with the needed FPS. To take a look at it in real time, I need to make a preview. Go to Render, Make Preview. It's better to place the environment into a separate layer. This will allow you to hide it in the viewport as well as to disable deformers, generators, and animators in order to increase performance. Note that if I hide this layer in the viewport, FPS won't change in any way. And if I disable these parameters, animation, generators, and deformers of the layer, the performance will drastically increase. Don't forget that Subdivision Surface has two detalization settings, one for the viewport and the other for the renderer. So you can leave Subdivision Surfaces enabled but decrease the value to an acceptable level for the editor. Or you can even set it to 0 and specify the desired detalization for the renderer.